Hi y'all, so since our last video lesson, we've learned that we're not going back to school for the rest of this year, and I know that makes some of you very sad, and to be honest, it makes me sad too. I would much rather go back to school and finish off the year as normal, but that's not the way it worked out. So we'll have to make the best of this and just push through somehow. So I hope that you all are doing well, and please reach out to me anytime you need me. So one of the most frustrating things about these videos is sometimes I end up filming the whole thing, and then when I play it back, I realize that I can't use the video and I have to start over. So that's happened to me already today. So I'm hoping that this time goes better. So sometimes when you see my video, that's the second, third, or even fourth take of the same thing, and they're still not perfect. So please forgive me. All right, so let's get to it. So we're going to be studying how to solve radical equations today. So you will need your note sheet, your worksheet, and your graphing calculator to begin. Okay, so you will see that every equation that we're solving involves a radical of some kind. We're only going to look at square roots and cube roots in this lesson, just because we don't have a lot of time this year, but it could also apply to fourth roots or fifth roots or whatever. So we're going to keep it simple with cube roots and square roots. Okay, so number one is the cube root of x minus 4 equals 2. Okay. So if you look at the top of the page, you'll see that there are bullet points. We're going to follow those steps and I'll explain what each one means. So notice that the first thing it says to do is isolate the radical. So in this case, the cube root of x, that's the radical that we want to be isolated or by itself. So this negative 4 is not part of the radical, so that means we want to eliminate that number. So I'm going to begin by adding 4 to both sides. So I would still have the cube root of x. The 4's would cancel out, and then 2 plus 4 is 6. So I have cube root of x equals 6. So the second step in the bullet points, we don't have to do that. That tells you what to do if you have 2 radicals in your equation, but we only have 1, so skip that step. So then it says we're going to raise both sides of the equation to the same power. So since this is a cube root, we are going to cube both sides of the equation. Then we will simplify. So on the left side, the cube root and the cube cancel each other out. So you'd be left with just x. Now on the right side, you would get your calculator and you would figure out what 6 cubed is. So you'd put in 6 raised to the third power, and you would find that answer to be 216. So the equation is solved, but the thing about these problems that we're going to do today is you have to check each of your answers with your calculator, because sometimes when you plug the answer back in, it doesn't give you the number that it's supposed to. And those are called extraneous solutions. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to set down the whiteboard and go to the calculator, which I'm using on my laptop again because the handheld is just too hard to see. So back to the laptop that I showed you in the past. Okay, so we're going to put the number, or the number 216 in for x, and you want to go to the original equation. So the original equation had a cube root symbol. So you'll find cube root under math. It's option number 4. So instead of x, oops, I pressed the wrong thing. Let me arrow back. Sometimes it messes up on the screen there. Okay, so cube root of x. So our answer was 216. So I'm going to plug in 216 for x. Now remember that the 4 was not inside of the radical. So on my calculator, I need to press the right arrow to get out of the radical, and then I put minus 4. Now some of you might have a slightly different calculator than I have, so you might have to play around with yours a little bit to see what is needed, but you may have to put the 216 in parentheses and then close off the parentheses before you put minus 4. So just see what your calculator needs. So if I press enter, the answer is 2. Now if you go back to the original problem, it was supposed to be 2. See how it has equals 2 at the end. That's what you wanted to happen, is to get that same number. So since we got 2, that means that our solution is just fine. So back to the whiteboard, that means that 216 is the correct answer for number 1. And we're done with that one. Now what's going to happen is when we plug these numbers in for some of these other problems, it won't give us the right answer. And you'll see in a few minutes some examples of that. So for now, number 1 is fine. The answer 216 worked. Okay, so for number 2, we've got a cube root symbol, and it looks a lot like number 1, except for the 4 is inside of the radical this time. So that first step of isolating the radical does not need to be done. It's already isolated. So you do not add 4 to both sides on this one. The 4 stays inside of the radical. And you would skip the second step also of what to do if you had 2 radicals. So we're on to step 3. We're raising both sides to a power. So since this is a cube root, I am going to cube both sides of the equation. So on the left side, the cube and the cube root will cancel out. So you'll have x minus 4. And on the right side, if you were to calculate 2 cubed, you would find that to be 8. And then I would solve that equation. It's just a linear equation. So I'll add 4 to both sides. So x will be 8 plus 4, 12. Okay. So it could be that 12 works. We have to check it in our calculator to be sure. So I'm going to go back to the calculator screen and try the answer 12. Okay, so again, it was a cube root. So I'm going to math, option 4. So our number for x was 12, so I'm plugging in that. So it's 12 minus 4. Remember, this time I want the 4 inside of the radical. So I'll press the right arrow to get out of it. And some of you might need to put 12 minus 4 in parentheses. And you should get the answer 2. So that's what it should have been in the problem. Just excuse me for a minute. I have to get up for a sec. Sorry about that. Sometimes my kids make noises and I have to shut the door to make sure I can't hear them. Okay, so 2 is the answer that it should have been in the problem, so that means 12 is fine. 12 is a solution to that equation. So the correct answer for number 2 was 12. Okay, so number 3. Let's see what this one is like. Okay, this one is a square root. So we've got 4x minus 7 and the square root symbol. 2 is on the outside and 5 is what it's equal to. So we do have to do the step of isolating the radical because that 2 is not part of the square root. So I would need to right away subtract 2 from both sides. So that leaves the square root the same for now. And then of course 5 minus 2 is 3. Now you don't have to do the second step, that's for 2 radicals. So to step 3, now we're at the point of raising both sides to a power. Now keep in mind that a square root implies that there's a 2 here even though it's not written. So you want to square both sides of the equation. So on the left side, the square and the square root will cancel out. And on the right side, 3 squared is of course 9. So this is another linear equation, simple one. So you would add 7 first. So you would get 4x equals 16 and divide by 4 and x will be 4. Okay, then we would have to go to the calculator and see if 4 actually works when we plug it in. So back to the screen over here. Now keep in mind this one was a square root and that's not in the math screen. It's on the left side of the calculator about halfway down and you have to press second first. So we will go to second square root. Okay. So it was 4x. You would say 4 times our answer, which was 4, minus 7. And I want the 2 to be on the outside. So for me, I know I have to press the right arrow to get out of the radical. And then plus 2. Some of you might need to put parentheses around the radical and then close off the parentheses after the 7 before you put plus 2. You just have to see what your calculator needs. But the answer should be 5. And if you look at the problem, it was supposed to equal 5, so that means our answer is good. So on number 3, the answer 4 was just fine. That is the final answer for number 3. Okay, number 4. So this is where things change, so make sure you pay close attention to these next couple problems because these are different than the others. Okay, so on this one, the Isolating is already done because that radical is already by itself, so step 1 is not needed. Step 2 is not needed either. So we're going right to the third step of raising both sides to a power. Now keep in mind that's a square root, which implies that there's a 2 here. So we're going to square both sides of the equation. So here's the part that's different. On the left side, in order to square x minus 4, it means to think of it as multiplication by itself. So think of it as x minus 4 times x minus 4. And on the right side, when you square and square root, you get, those cancel each other out and you get 2x. Okay. So now on the left side, in order to multiply those two things, you would do FOIL. Remember, FOIL is first, outside, inside, last. So that applies here too. So first would be x squared. The outside would be negative 4x. The inside would be negative 4x. And the last would be 16. And then bring down the 2x. This can be simplified a little bit because negative 4x and negative 4x can be combined. So it's really x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 2x. Now this one's different in that it is a quadratic equation. Quadratic means that you see a square in your equation. So you have to solve the equation by one of the methods that we learned earlier this year. Any of those methods require you to have a 0 on one side of the equation before you can take it further. So right now I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides to get the 0 over here that I'm going to need. So on the left side I would still have x squared. Here I'm going to combine negative 8x and negative 2x, so that would be negative 10x, and then I'm going to bring down 16. So this is the equation that we want to solve. So most of them are going to be factorable, and this one is actually an easy one to factor, but if you find that you can't factor, you can always do the quadratic formula that we studied in the last semester. Okay, so this one is factorable, so let's look at this. So in order to get the x squared that you need at the beginning, they both can be x, because when you did the first part of FOIL, you would get x squared. Then you look at your final number, 16, and you think of its factors. So there's like 16 and 1, 8 and 2, 4 and 4. You want to figure out what combination will add up to negative 10. Well, 8 and 2 makes 10, but you want it to be negative 10. So that implies that both of the numbers must be negative. So it's negative 8 and negative 2. And that is because negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. And negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. So that works. Okay, so then you would set both of the factors equal to 0. We've done this before. And on this one, I would add 8 to both sides. So x would be 8. And over here, I would add 2 to both sides. So x would be 2. So we have two possibilities, 8 and 2. Now I say possibilities because I don't know if they're really going to work when I plug them into the calculator. So that's what we need to do next, is to check these answers on the calculator. So checking this one is a little bit different because we have x's on both sides of the equation. So let me show you what you're going to do in this case. So let me clear this out so it's not so cluttered looking. Okay, so on the left side you've got x minus 4. So let's try 8. So we're going to do 8 minus 4, and of course that's 4. What we want to do is see if we plug in 8 on the opposite side of the equation, would we also get the same number, 4? So let's try it out. So we're going to do the square root of 2 times 8. So 2 times 8 is 16, square root of 16, 4. Yeah, so that makes sense. So they both give you the same number, 4. So that's what you want to happen, is that the left side needs to be the same thing as the right side. So since we got the number 4 twice, that means that 8 is a solution of this equation. So then we have to try 2. So we'll do exactly the same thing with the number 2. So on the left side, we would put 2 minus 4, and that's negative 2. And on the right side, we would do square root 2 times 2. And we get 2. Okay, so look what happened this time. When we plugged in the number on the left side, we got negative 2. And on the right side, we got positive 2. So those are not the same thing. So that means that the solution 2 is not truly a solution. That is called an extraneous solution. That means it's no good. So it does not mean that we made any mistake. Nothing's wrong. It just means that sometimes when you plug answers in, they don't give you the number that they're supposed to be. So back to this one, on number 4. When we plugged in the number 8, everything was fine. We got the same number on both sides, so 8 is good. But when we plugged in 2, we did not get the same number on both sides, so that means 2 is no good. That's called extraneous. So that means you do not include that as a solution. So for number 4, there was only one solution, which is 8. 2 is no good. All right, let's take a look at number 5. So we have on one side x plus 2, and on the other side 2x plus 28 is inside of the radical. So this is similar to the previous one in that you do not need to isolate the radical. It's already by itself on the right side. So we're going right to the step of squaring both sides. Because it's a square root, we are squaring both sides of the equation. So on the left side, squaring this means to multiply x plus 2 times itself. And on the right side, squaring the square root cancels that out. So you have 2x plus 28. So on the left side, I'm going to do FOIL on this. So it would be first is x squared. The outside is 2x. The inside is 2x. And the last is 4. And on the other side, it's 2x plus 28. So I can simplify this a bit by adding 2x and 2x. So that would be x squared plus 4x plus 4. And on the right side, 2x plus 28. So this is another quadratic equation because you see a square. So I'm going to need to get a 0 on one side in order to make this able to be solved. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, and I'm also going to subtract 28. If I do both of those things, I would get these two to cancel out and I'd get 0, which is what I wanted. So I'm gonna add these together. So the square would still be there. 4x minus 2x would be 2x, and 4 minus 28 would be negative 24. Okay, so this is the quadratic equation that we're gonna solve. So again, it's something that is factorable, so we're gonna do that, but if you can't factor, go to the quadratic formula. This one's pretty easy. To get x squared, they would have to be x and x here. You would think of factors of negative 24, and there are a bunch. You'd want to think of like 24 and 1, 12 and 2, 6 and 4, 8 and 3. You want to think of what combination would give you 2x in the middle. So it's got to be positive 2. So what you'll find that works is to have positive 6 for one of them and negative 4 as the other one. Because 6 and negative 4 adds up to negative or positive 2, and 6 times negative 4 adds up to negative 24. So both of those work out. Okay, so then I would set each one equal to 0. And on this one, I would subtract the 6 and get x equals negative 6. And over here, I would add the 4. And x would be 4. So we have two possibilities, and again, I'm using the word possibilities because they may or may not work when we plug them back in. So that's what we have to try next. So back to the calculator. And you always want to plug them back into the original equation when you do it. Okay, so we're going to try negative 6 first. And again, I'm going to clear this to see a blank screen, a little easier to see. Okay, so on the left side I have x plus 2. So I'm doing negative 6 plus 2. And that is negative 4. So I want to see if I would get negative 4 on the other side as well. So you would put square root 2 times negative 6 plus 28. Okay, so when I do that, I get positive 4. So on one side, I got negative 4. The other side, I got positive 4. Those are not the same thing. So that means negative 6 is not really a solution. So that's called an extraneous solution. So that's no good. We'll have to get rid of that later. Okay, so now I'm going to try 4. So we'll have 4 plus 2. And of course, that's 6. And then the other one is square root of 2 times 4 plus 28. and enter. And that's also 6. So for that one, we got 6 both times. So if you get the same number twice, that means it is a solution. Okay, so what does that mean over here on our work? So we plugged in the number -6, but we found that we got not the same number on both sides when we did that. So that means that's no good. That's called an extraneous solution. But when we tried this number, everything was fine. So in this case, the 4 is okay, but the -6 is not. Okay, although the last two look difficult, they're actually not. They're easier than those last two that we did. So these won't be hard at all. So you've got a square root of 2x minus 1, and then a square root of x plus 4. Okay, so in the second step at the top of the page, the bullet points, it says that if you have two radicals, move one of them to the other side of the equation. Well, in this case, they're both already on one side of the equation, so you don't have to change anything. You will go right to the step of raising to a power. So these are square roots, so that means you're going to square both sides. So what happens is on both sides of the equation, the radicals cancel out. So you just have 2x minus 1 equals x plus 4. This is not quadratic. You don't see a square in the equation. This is linear, so we're just going to solve it like a simple linear equation. So we're going to need to get the x's all on the same side. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. That gets rid of that one. So 2x minus x would be x. Drop down the -1, and we still have 4. And then this will be easy. I'll just add 1 to each side, and x will be 5. Okay, you still have to check these. They may or may not work when you plug them back in. So let's go to the calculator and see if 5 is okay. Okay, so we got the square root of 2x, so that would be 2 times 5 minus 1. And we find that to be 3. And on the other side, if we plug in 5, that's also 3. So we get the same number both times. That means 5 is good. 5 is a solution. So for number 6, x equals 5 is correct. Okay, so one more and we will be all done for the day. So we've got cube roots on this one. So there are 2 cube roots in this problem. And the bullet point says if this happens, we want one of them added to the other side. So the easiest way to do that would be to take the second one and add it to the other side. Because it was negative here, it's got to be positive when you add it to the other side. So that'll be the easiest way to do it. So you would still have the cube root of 8x at the beginning. This would cancel, and on the right side you would have cube root of 6x minus 2. Okay, with a cube root on both sides, you go to the step of raising both sides to the third power, or cubing both sides. So the cube and the cube root cancel out, so you'll have 8x equals 6x minus 2. That is a linear equation, no square in it. So we just solve that linear equation by subtracting 6x. So 8x minus 6x would be 2x. These cancel and you still have -2. So if you divide by 2, you would get x equals -1. And you still have to check it. So we got to go back to the calculator and check -1. So last thing we got to do today. Let's give it a check here. Okay. So you're going to go to the original equation always when you plug it in. So I'm going to math, number 4, cube root, 8x. So that'd be 8 times -1. I want to get out of the radical, so I'm pressing the right arrow on my calculator. Some of you may need to close off parentheses. And then there'd be a subtraction sign, another cube root, math, number 4. And we'd have 6 times -1 minus 2. And out of the radical with the right arrow, or some of you close parentheses and then enter. So notice that it gives you 0, which is what it should have been in the problem. So that one works. So the final answer for number 7 is -1. So I hope you all are doing well, and please let me know if you need any help, and have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.